I used to think my nights were all the same. I'd leave the precinct, pour lukewarm coffee into a stained travel mug, and let the quiet neighborhoods pull the shift out of me. On that night, I didn't even put on the radio. It was early fall. Dead leaves skittered across the pavement like insects. Kids' bikes leaned against porches, and the air had that metallic scent, like the moment before lightning hits. It was one of those normal moments you only recognize as special because of what came after. Bear was next to me, head over the console, tongue lolling out just a little. He was a big shepherd mix, scars under his black fur from his time overseas. I'd been assigned to him for about 8 months, and in that time he'd saved my backside more than once. He wore his duty harness like a second skin. His ears twitched every time my tires rattled over a manhole cover. Every once in a while he'd sigh, and I'd rub his scruff without thinking. That's what the nights were usually like, monotonous, with tiny comforts. It all started small. Our beat took us through those upper middle-class streets where every house looked like the one before it. Halloween decorations still sat in garages. Lawns were edged, hedges trimmed. It was late, so the only light came from the yellow glow of porch bulbs and street lamps. I remember thinking I should have eaten before I clocked in. Always with the missed meals, I scolded myself. The engine hummed. The dash lit my fingers blue. Then Bear growled, not the deep, furious bark he'd use at a suspect, but a low, rolling rumble that vibrated the center console. He stared at a 2-story house with shutters painted the same beige as the siding. My skin prickled. "What's wrong, boy?" I whispered, like you do when you're alone. He only growled harder. The hair on his neck was up, tail straight, eyes fixed. There was nothing. No lights, no movement, not even a car in the drive. I tapped the brakes, half expecting someone to step out waving at me. Nobody did. A curtain fluttered, but that could have been a ceiling fan. Maybe a cat, I thought. Bear's war dog training meant he'd sometimes react to smells I couldn't pick up. Explosive residue, narcotics, that sort of thing. So I told myself that's what it was. A scent carried on the wind, something harmless. I rolled past, hand steady on the wheel, heart beating a little too quick for my liking. 2 streets later, he did it again. Same growl, different house. And then he did something he had never done in all the time I'd known him. He refused to go near a mailbox. It was a metal post with a brick base, one of those fancy ones. His leash jerked tight when I tried to lead him toward it on foot. He sat his hindquarters down and whined, low and high, head turning away like a child refusing cough syrup. "I'm not dragging you to smell a mailbox," I muttered. He kept whining until I led him back to the cruiser. I sat behind the wheel a moment, the badge heavy on my chest. It should have been funny, a dog refusing to sniff a mailbox. Instead, it felt like a warning. Local dispatch was silent, just the occasional click as someone keyed their mic to say, "Unit clear," or 10-8. No domestic calls, no traffic stops. The air smelled sharper now, like cut pennies. The moon was a sliver caught between clouds. The call came then, a static-filled beep that made me jump. "Car 9, respond to a welfare check at 1420 Willow Way." Neighbors haven't seen the family since yesterday. Lights are on. The dispatcher's voice sounded bored. I looked at Bear. He tilted his head as if he understood every word. Willow Way was only a few blocks away. The houses there had wraparound porches and tasteful landscaping, the kind of place where people left glowing reviews about neighborhood watch. I flicked on my overhead lights, no siren, just the silent blue strobes that cut through shadows. Bear shifted, paws braced on the floor. The front door at 1420 was locked. I knocked and called out. No answer. The porch light buzzed, casting thick moth wings over my hands. I radioed the station for permission to make entry. The response was garbled, but sounded like, "Go ahead." The steel knob was cold and slick. It turned with a little pressure, the old trick of a credit card on the deadbolt. The door eased open on silent hinges. Light spilled out, bright and wrong. Every bulb on the main floor was on. It looked like any other family home. Pictures on the walls, shoes by the door, a basket with keys and mail. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Not rot. Not yet. It was iron and meat. Metal again, I thought, stomach flipping. "Police department," I called. Bear's ears flattened. He stuck close to my leg, body low, tail twitching. We cleared the living room. A TV played a home renovation show on mute, subtitles marching across the bottom. Couch cushions were tossed. The coffee table had a ring of spilled red wine dried into the wood. The kitchen was next. Pots simmered on an electric range, now cold. A roast sat in a pan on the counter, gray and jellied. On the table were 4 plates. 3 had half-eaten meat and vegetables. 1 was empty. Chair toppled onto the tile. Forks lay like someone had dropped them mid-bite. My throat clenched. Bear whined at the hallway. It was a sound I hadn't heard from him, part groan, part plea. "Easy," I whispered, my voice cracking on the word. He stepped forward anyway, shoulders tense, hackles still high. We moved down the hall, my hand on his harness, my other hand on my sidearm. It's weird what you notice under stress. The flicker of a fluorescent light over a painting. The way the wallpaper pattern didn't line up at the corner. The first bedroom was empty. A twin bed made with pink sheets. Stuffed animals lined up on the pillows. Posters of singers smiled at me. A tablet lay face down on the rug. The next room had a pile of laundry on the chair, a laptop open to a desktop screen. The bathroom smelled of old soap. The last door was closed. I hesitated. Bear pressed his flank against my leg, like he was pushing me. My heart hammered so loud, I thought the people inside would hear it, if there were any. I turned the handle and pushed. Every light in that room was on, too. At first, I thought the family was alive. They were sitting upright around a table, hands resting on the wood. A man at the head, a woman to his right, 2 teenagers across. Their clothes were neat. Their heads were turned toward each other, mouths open as if mid-conversation. Then my brain caught up. They weren't looking at anyone. They didn't have eyes. Where there should have been eyes were smooth hollows, clean scoops as if someone had taken a spoon and removed everything. Their jaws were gone. Tongues hung down, dry and gray. No blood ran down their chins. There was no spray on the walls, no drip on the table. Just absence. My grip tightened on my gun until my knuckles ached. Bear didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He shook, whining like a puppy. What happened to you? I thought, nausea rising. My training kicked in, the dispassionate part of your brain that catalogs things when the emotional part is overloaded. No visible trauma on the bodies besides the faces. Hands limp, food untouched, the posture of someone told to hold still. No obvious defensive wounds, no sign of a struggle. I took a step back, feeling the corners of the room close in. Bear spun then, nails scraping the hardwood. He stared at the window behind us. A sheer white curtain hung there, nothing blocking the glass. He growled low, the kind of growl that makes your ribs vibrate. I followed his gaze. Someone was standing across the street, almost directly in line with the window. They were perfectly still, arms by their sides, head tilted just enough to suggest interest. The porch light behind them made them a silhouette. I couldn't see a face. I opened my mouth to call out, maybe to tell them to leave, maybe to ask for help. No sound came out. Bear's tail was straight, his body between me and the window. The person didn't move, they just watched, their outline unwavering. The hairs on my neck prickled and stayed that way. In that moment, I realized that the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of something holding its breath. Dawn was a gray suggestion on the horizon by the time we backed out of Willow Way. The sky hadn't committed to morning yet. The cruiser's clock said 4:17 a.m. My hand shook on the steering wheel. I don't remember putting the car in gear or radioing in the scene, but I must have, because static crackled through the speaker and then nothing. Dispatch, do you copy? Willow Way, we have multiple. The rest was static. I tried again. More static. I tapped the set like that would fix it. It didn't. Bear was in the back seat now. Department policy said he rode there unless we were on a call, but he'd stayed by me in that house until I backed him out. Now he paced, nails clicking, body tense. His ears were pinned. He kept looking over his shoulder, toward the rear window. Every time I checked the mirror, the street behind us was empty. My stomach churned. Maybe the towers are overloaded, I thought. Maybe sunspot interference or a power grid issue. Technobabble I'd heard from radio techs popped into my head like a prayer. I drove toward the wooded park on the edge of our district, mostly because it was open land. I didn't want to be boxed in by houses. Half a mile from the scene, I pulled up to a trailhead used by joggers and cyclists. In daylight, it was a friendly place with painted lines and a station that sold energy bars. Now it looked alien. The gate was open, the gravel lot empty. Birds should have been chirping. They weren't. I keyed the radio again. Car 9, do you copy? Static. Car 9, officer needs assistance. Static, then a faint hiss that might have been breathing. Hello? Nothing. Bear growled, louder. He was staring into the tree line, body forward, ready to spring. I shoved the cruiser into park and reached back to pat his head. His fur was slick with sweat. "Stay," I whispered, though I knew he wouldn't. He had never stayed when things were dangerous. The movement started as flickers between trunks. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks. Then something broke cover 20 yards ahead. A person, no, several, burst through the brush, running full tilt. Their clothes were shredded. Their feet were bare and bloody. They moved too fast, arms pumping, heads jerking. Some made guttural sounds. Foam slid from their mouths, sticky strings glistening. I froze. The rational part of my brain cataloged details: race, age, gender. The part that loved horror movies whispered, zombies. Then the rational part slapped it away. These were human, or they had been, hours ago. "Stop! Police!" The training came out of my mouth by reflex. They didn't even seem to hear. The first one, a middle-aged woman in a torn nightgown, hit the hood of my cruiser. Her head snapped, teeth bared. She slammed her fist on the metal, then tried to crawl over the hood toward me. Her fingers scraped. More slammed into the side. Hands slapped at the glass. I drew my weapon with shaking fingers and fired through the windshield at the nearest face. The glass spider-webbed. She dropped. It didn't slow the ones behind her. Bear exploded out of the back seat. I didn't even see him move. He launched himself through the half-opened window like a missile, a bark tearing from his throat that echoed across the lot. He hit one of the charging people in the chest and took them down. His teeth clamped on an arm. He shook. There was a wet crunch. The thing screeched, not like a person, but like a feral animal. Bear let go and lunged at another. His body was a blur. For a second, I had the insane thought that he looked like he did in the training videos. But this wasn't a padded arm. This was flesh. "Back, back, Bear," I yelled, voice breaking. He didn't listen. I shot again, aiming at legs like I'd been taught when we wanted to stop but not kill. These people barely reacted. They crawled over fallen bodies, fingers digging into gravel, foam dripping. One slammed her head into my window again and again, spider cracks spreading. Another latched onto the side mirror, his jaw unhinging. His teeth scraped at the glass. How are their jaws working, I thought, brain trying to make sense of the anatomy. Then he cracked the mirror off. Metal squealed. I felt like I was in slow motion. Adrenaline made my hearing tunneled. I could hear Bear's snarls like they were right next to my ear. I could hear the cruiser's engine ticking, the plink-plink of the broken windshield. I could hear my own breath, fast and shallow. Shots snapped, bright and loud. Bodies jerked and fell. Then hands pulled them away as more took their place. There were too many. 10, maybe 15, all moving like they'd missed the part of human behavior that makes you flinch when someone points a gun at you. I slammed the car into drive. Gravel spun under the tires. I hit the gas. The cruiser lurched forward. A body rolled off the hood. Another hit the bumper. I didn't have time to go around. A sickening thump came from under us. Bear barked and ran alongside, then yelped. I saw him out of the corner of my eye stumble, his hindquarters dropping. My heart stopped. I slammed the brakes, threw open my door, and grabbed him by the harness. Blood seeped from his side. A jagged wound near his ribs pumped red with each breath. His eyes were still on the attackers. He tried to stand and nearly fell. "No, stay," I begged, the word a croak. He whined, but let me lift his front paws into the back seat. His claws scrabbled for purchase. His weight was heavier than I remembered. I hauled him in, slammed the door, and threw myself behind the wheel. Hands hit my window. Teeth scraped metal. I floored the accelerator. The cruiser fishtailed out of the gravel lot, back wheels throwing stones. I clipped something, and kept going. The bodies chased, their feet bleeding, but I gained ground. In the mirror, I saw them following until the trees hid them. I realized then, with a cold clarity, that their faces were ones I recognized. The woman from the PTA board, the teenage clerk from the gas station, the jogger who always ran with a neon vest and waved to us. They had been human hours ago. Now they were something else. My breath came in harsh gasps. Bear lay panting on the back seat, his side rising and falling too fast. His tongue lolled. I reached back at a red light, though there was no traffic, and pressed my palm against his ribs. Warm blood soaked my sleeve. "Hold on," I muttered. "Hold on." The radio hissed again. Static resolved into a voice I didn't recognize. "Repeat. Do not engage. Unknown contagion. All units retreat to..." Static swallowed the rest. I cursed and pounded the dash. The industrial park ahead had always seemed like a blight on our district. Concrete, chain-link, graffitied warehouses. Now it felt like salvation. I took a hard turn and crashed through a rusted service gate. The cruiser rattled over cracked asphalt. I spotted a maintenance garage with a roll-up door half open. I slammed the brakes, hopped out, and ducked under the door. Bear's harness clutched in my hand. He tried to walk and collapsed. I threw his front legs over my shoulders and half dragged, half carried him inside. The door squealed as I pulled it down. It clicked into place. Darkness swallowed us. I set Bear down gently on an oil-stained concrete floor. His sides heaved. His eyes were still on the door, ears pricked, mouth pulled back in a snarl even as he panted. I knelt beside him, fingers shaking as I felt around the wound. Blood, muscle, maybe broken rib. He whimpered when I pressed. "Sorry, I know," I whispered, my throat tight. I tore my sleeve with my teeth and wrapped it around his chest, tying it as tight as I dared. He licked my hand. It was a weak lick, but it was there. Tears pricked my eyes. "Don't you dare leave me," I thought. "Not after everything. Not now." I leaned my forehead against his. He huffed, his breath hot. Outside, something slammed against the roll-up door. It vibrated. Bear's head snapped up. He growled, deep and broken. The door rattled again. I raised my sidearm, muzzle aimed at the metal, but it held. After a minute, The banging stopped. Silence pressed around us like the weight of the whole building. Only Bear's labored breathing and my own heartbeat filled the dark. We were alive, for the moment. The worst part was knowing I had no idea what was happening outside those thin metal walls. I felt like the world had flipped, and I wasn't sure if we were the lucky ones or the ones forgotten. We sat in that garage until the sky went from gray to a sickly yellow, then to full daylight. I tried the radio at regular intervals, half hoping to hear someone's voice, half afraid of what I'd hear. Nothing but static. I found a flashlight and a pair of bolt cutters in a tool chest. I found bottled water and a bag of stale chips in a vending machine that had been pried open long ago. I soaked my shirt in water and wrung it into Bear's mouth. He licked weakly. His breathing was shallow but steady. The makeshift bandage was soaked through and sticky. At some point, adrenaline burned off and exhaustion took its place. My body felt like it was filled with sand. Bear's head lay on my lap. His fur was still damp with sweat and blood. I ran my fingers over his scars, the ones he'd earned overseas. I thought about the first time I met him. He'd been waiting in the canine kennel, a lean figure with amber eyes. They told me he'd pulled his previous handler out of a minefield by biting into the man's collar and dragging. They told me he'd lost part of his ear to shrapnel. He'd looked at me then, not judging, just taking me in. I'd extended my hand like I'd been taught. He'd sniffed and then licked my wrist. "Your new partner," the trainer had said. I hadn't realized how true that word would become. You get used to the smell, I thought, half delirious, half remembering a joke from training when we'd gone through gas simulations. Back then, the world had made sense. Up was up. The enemy was over there. Now the enemy was at my door and might look like my neighbor. The idea made my stomach churn. I needed to get Bear help. Staying hidden in a warehouse wasn't a plan. We needed a vet, antibiotics, stitches, real bandages. We needed to get to the main station or out of the city. I knew there were storm drains that ran from this industrial park toward the outskirts. I'd chased skateboarders out of them more than once. They were dark, cramped, and full of God knows what. But if what I saw was spreading above ground, the tunnels might be our best bet. The roll-up door had a small man door next to it. I cracked it open, peeking through. Nothing. No movement in the street. No bloody footprints. The air smelled like diesel and something sweet like spoiled fruit. I opened it all the way and listened. Wind hissed through chain link. Far off, a siren wailed and then cut short. No moans, no shuffling. I eased Bear's harness over his head. He groaned as I lifted. "I know," I whispered. "I'm sorry." He licked my wrist again. It was like he was forgiving me for everything before we'd even done it. I slipped the bolt cutters through my belt and hoisted Bear. He weighed around 80 pounds of pure muscle, and with his added gear, it felt like carrying a sack of wet cement. I staggered toward the drainage ditch at the end of the lot. The cover was rusted. I wedged the cutters under the edge and pried. It groaned. With one last heave, it popped free. Below, a ladder descended into darkness that smelled of algae and mildew. Cold air wafted up, damp and stale. I lowered Bear first, one arm under his chest, the other gripping the rung. He whimpered as he dangled, but he didn't thrash. I climbed down after him, boots slipping on slime. The tunnel was about 6 feet tall and wide enough for 2 people. Concrete curved above and below, slick with trickles of water. My flashlight cut a thin beam through the dark, sending reflections bouncing off damp walls. It was quiet, but sound traveled weirdly. Every drip echoed. Every footstep seemed to come from everywhere. I slung Bear across my shoulders like a fireman carry. His breath warmed the side of my neck. "We're going on a field trip," I whispered, as if he needed me to fill the silence. What am I doing? I thought, carrying my dog through a sewer. This is insane. But the alternative, staying above ground, felt worse. So I kept moving, one foot in front of the other. The flashlight flickered. I banged it against my thigh, and it steadied. The first time I heard a noise that wasn't ours, I stopped dead. It was faint, a scraping like metal on stone. Then a distant cry, high and broken. My stomach dropped. I pressed my back against the tunnel wall and killed the light. Darkness swallowed us. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing and Bear's rasp. Then from deeper in the system, something answered. It wasn't human. It was more like a feral yell, a sound made by someone who'd forgotten language. It echoed, bouncing around curves. Bear lifted his head and growled, the sound low and wet. They're down here too, I realized, a cold dread soaking through me. Another scrape, closer, claws, nails, something dragged across concrete. I eased Bear off my shoulders and set him down gently. His paws slipped in water. He tried to stand and fell. He still faced the direction of the sound, teeth bared. I raised my gun, eyes straining to see something, anything in the dark. Shapes moved. Not many, but enough. Pale arms, glinting eyes in the flashlight reflection when I dared to flick it on. They moved hunched, hands brushing the floor like apes. The smell hit me, thick and sour like fermentation. They hissed, one lunged. Time lost meaning. Shots fired, muzzle flashes strobing the tunnel. Shadows leapt. I hit something. It fell and writhed. Another clamped fingers around my ankle. Teeth scraped my boot. I kicked, foot connecting with a face. It grunted. Bear barked, deep and vicious. He dragged himself forward and bit a reaching hand. My flashlight slipped from my fingers. It clattered away, its beam spinning wildly as it rolled. Darkness closed in again. "Bear," I called, my voice raw. He barked back, and in that bark was everything: anger, pain, fear, loyalty. The sound of it filled the tunnel, echoing off the walls, making it hard to tell where anything was. The infected, or whatever they were, hissed like snakes. Bear lunged again, his nails scratching wet concrete. I fired towards sound, toward movement. Hot casings hit my hand, stinging. For a heartbeat, one of the things was right in my face, eyes milky, mouth open and bleeding. I jammed the barrel under its chin and squeezed. Its head snapped back. It collapsed, twitching. Hands brushed my shoulders, my waist. I shoved back, heart hammering. Bear's body bumped into mine. His fur was slick. He snapped at the air, clamping down on something. A scream cut through, then gurgled out. It smelled like copper and shit. I realized then we were going to die here if I didn't move. There's a moment in fights where panic can turn to focus if you grab it. I grabbed it like a lifeline. "Bear, here," I called, hoping his training would override his instinct. He barked once and shuffled toward my voice. I grabbed his harness and pulled, half dragging him, half stumbling forward. The infected followed, their fingers scraping. I bumped into a junction, concrete splitting in two directions. Which way? In the dark, I chose the narrowest outlet. A pipe barely big enough for me to crawl through. I shoved Bear through first, his body scraping. He whined. Water drenched us. I wriggled in after, the pipe walls slimy against my shoulders. Hands grabbed my boots as I kicked. I let out a grunt that might have been a scream and yanked my legs free. I pulled myself forward, elbows aching, Bear's tail hitting my face, his body wedged in front. Behind us, frustrated hisses echoed. They couldn't fit. For a moment, I almost laughed, relief coming out as a crazy giggle. We crawled until my arms burned and my lungs begged. Light appeared ahead. Not artificial, not flashlight, daylight, bright and white. My eyes watered. I pushed harder, shoving Bear toward it, the pipe walls scraping my knuckles. We tumbled out onto wet grass in a ditch outside the city limits. Morning sun broke through a smear of smog, turning the sky pink and orange. I lay there, panting, blinking against the brightness. Bear flopped beside me. His tongue hung out. His chest moved shallowly, but it moved. We were outside. Above us, the thump of helicopter blades cut through air. I squinted and saw two dark shapes hovering. Military black, not news. A convoy of tan trucks rumbled down the road beyond the ditch. Men in hazmat suits jumped out, weapons at the ready, masks sealed. One spotted us and shouted. They moved cautiously toward us, guns raised. "It's okay," I called, voice cracking. "Officer, K9 unit, we need—" My words died. Bear, who moments ago could barely stand, shoved himself up and barked like he did on bite drills. His fur bristled. He planted himself between me and the approaching soldiers. He wouldn't stop barking. It wasn't a scared bark. It was warning. "What the hell?" I mumbled, reaching to calm him. My hand hovered over his back. He ignored me. His eyes were fixed on one of the soldiers. The man's gait was off, not quite right. His arms hung too loose, elbows bowed. The hazmat mask hid his face, but the skin around his eyes looked pale. His pupils seemed huge, swallowing his irises. He moved stiffly, like he'd forgotten how to use a human body. Bear snapped at the air. The other soldiers flinched back, rifles raising toward Bear. "No!" I shouted, throwing my arm out. "Don't shoot him!" I turned to the man Bear was staring at. He stopped 10 feet away, his head tilted slowly. He didn't hold his gun like someone trained. He held it like a prop. His fingers flexed. He took another step, too smooth, a glide instead of a walk. For a second, through the clear plastic of the mask, his lip curled. A line of drool slid down his chin. Then everything happened at once. Bear lunged, bark exploding from his chest. One of the other soldiers saw the movement, and maybe sensing what Bear already knew, swung his rifle toward his comrade. "Down!" someone shouted. The infected soldier's head snapped toward the voice, jaw stretching impossibly wide. He started to leap forward, but his head jerked as a bullet tore through the mask. He collapsed, blood spraying inside the suit. Bear's bark cut off. He sat hard, legs splaying. His chest heaved. The remaining soldiers surrounded us, weapons scanning, eyes wide. "Are you bit?" one demanded through a respirator. "No," I gasped. "We're clean. My dog, he knew. He wouldn't let him near me." The man's eyes flicked to Bear, then to the corpse in the suit. He nodded once. "Get them a medic," he barked over his shoulder. Feet pounded away. Bear leaned against my leg, exhausted. He looked up at me, the whites of his eyes showing. I stroked his head, fingers trembling. "You did good," I whispered. My voice broke on the last word. He licked my hand. His tongue was dry, but the gesture was the same one he'd given me that first day in the kennel. It felt like a promise. Later, someone would tell me the first confirmed case was officially recorded days after that morning. That families started getting evacuated when the news broke. They'd talk about patient zero and cause vectors and transmission rates. They would argue about whether dogs could carry it. They'd make charts and graphs and hold press briefings with technobabble about viral loads and CDC protocols. But when I think about that night, I don't remember the news footage or the sirens or the white tents. I remember Bear's low growl at a mailbox. I remember the way his body vibrated when he stood between me and that window. I remember him dragging himself through a pipe he could barely fit through, never once letting go of my sleeve. They say the first case was spotted days later, but Bear knew. He always knew, and if he hadn't, I don't think I would have made it out.